Hello. I will be reading the next two chapters in Serafina and the Twisted Staff, chapter 28 and 29. So I hope you enjoy it. Serafina, Braden said gently. He did not move toward her or say more. It was as if he was gazing upon some sort of rare animal in the forest, and he didn't want to scare her off. She did not move. "Hello, Braden," she said, her voice trembling. All the emotions she was feeling were in those two simple words: the sadness for what had happened to Gideon, the sorriness for her part in it, and the fear of his reaction. "You've come back," Braden said. When she heard the faint, uncertain trace of surprise and hope in his voice, she realized that he did not hate her, he had missed her, and that was far more than she had ever hoped for. She nodded to let him know that yes, it was her intention to come back. "I'm right sorry about everything that happened," she said. Just as Braden started to move toward her, Serafina noticed Lady Rowena again, standing behind him. Serafina expected the girl to be angry, maybe even start yelling at her to go back to the forest where she belonged, but she didn't. Rowena's face was white with fear. "What are you doing here?" she asked warily. "Why have you come back here after what you did?" "Rowena," Braden said, lifting his hand to assuage her. "You are not wanted here," Rowena said to Serafina. "Rowena, stop," Braden said, touching her arm. "You're wrong. She is wanted here." "Thank you," Serafina said softly to Braden. She knew she didn't deserve his loyalty, but she was relieved to have it. "I think I know what happened to Gideon, why he attacked me." Braden did not seem to absorb her words. "Did you hear what happened to Mr. Rinaldi?" he asked her, his voice trembling with misery and confusion. "My pa told me that he was kicked by a horse. Was it one of those stallions?" "No," Braden said, the shame in his voice so heartbreaking that she wanted to hug him. "It was one of my horses," he said. "But it wasn't your fault, Braden," Serafina said empathetically. "But I was the one who trained them," he said, lowering his head. "I never thought one of my horses would ever do something like that." "That's exactly what I'm saying," Serafina said. "It wasn't your horse's fault, and it wasn't Gideon who attacked me. Those animals were under someone else's control." Braden raised his head. "What do you mean?" Rowena suddenly stepped between them. "She's talking about witchcraft. She's trying to trick us." "She's not trying to trick us," Braden said. "You can't possibly want this creature here," Rowena said. "Yes, I do want her here," Braden said. "She's my friend." "But you saw her," Rowena said. "She bites." "Many of my friends do when they're cornered," Braden said. Serafina smiled, but Rowena stopped and looked at Braden, confused, her brows furrowed. Serafina could see by the expression on her face that Rowena was truly struggling to understand what was going on. But how could she? So many awful, incomprehensible things were happening at Biltmore. Serafina turned toward her. I know this must all seem very strange, Rowena," she said, "but I didn't mean to hurt Gideon. I would never do anything to harm him or Braden or anyone else at Biltmore, including you." Rowena looked at her and seemed to take it in, what she had said, but she was still suspicious. She looked uncertainly at Braden. "What she's telling you about the animals can't be true," she said. "Black magic isn't real." "Trust me," Braden said firmly. "Sometimes it is." "Are you saying you actually believe her?" Rowena asked. It wasn't anger, but genuine astonishment. "I do," he said. "It all fits." "This all makes sense to you?" Lady Rowena said in disbelief, shaking her head. "Braden and I have been through this together before, Lady Rowena," Serafina said. "We've learned to trust each other. And we've learned to trust what we see, even when what we see seems impossible," Braden said. Rowena looked at Braden. "But is this truly what you want, Braden? You want to be around this ragged girl?" "Yes, I do," Braden said. "I should have never doubted her. She's my closest friend, Rowena, but that doesn't mean Serafina and I can't be your friend as well." Rowena's face roiled in dismay, and she turned away. She took several steps down the path. For a moment, Serafina thought she was going to walk back to Biltmore on her own, even at nightfall. But then Rowena hesitated. Serafina had disliked Rowena from the first moment she'd seen her horseback riding with Braden, and she hated the way Rowena was frightened of the things she didn't understand, and the girl had definitely jumped to all the wrong conclusions about her. But as Serafina watched Rowena standing there in the path, she thought maybe Rowena was far smarter and tougher than she first appeared. Maybe she wasn't the only one who had jumped to conclusions. Rowena seemed to be thinking, everything through now, trying to understand the situation she was in. Serafina watched as Rowena exhaled a long, uneven breath, then turned and looked at her and Braden. The aloofness and disdain that had always been Rowena's armor had broken down a little bit and molded into something else. There was a seriousness in her eyes that Serafina hadn't seen before. She looked like a girl who wasn't going to give up, who was determined to figure out where she fit in and where she belonged. And that was a girl Serafina could relate to. Serafina stepped slowly toward her. "I know that you and I are very different," Serafina said, "but I am not your enemy." Lady Rowena did not reply, but for the first time she was looking at her and truly listening to her. "We have both said things and done things around each other that we shouldn't have," Serafina said, "but there's danger at Biltmore far more important than any of that. Black magic, evil spells, whatever you want to call it, but it's very real and we've got to stop it." Rowena studied her without saying a word for several seconds. Serafina could not tell if it was suspicion or wariness or fear, or if somehow she'd managed to get through to her. But then Rowena spoke. "You know," Lady Rowena said to her, "you're a rather fierce person." "And you're altogether too well dressed," Serafina said. "We all have our faults." As Lady Rowena looked at Serafina, the edge of her mouth curled into a little smile. "We do, indeed," she said finally. While they were talking, the setting sun had been gradually withdrawing its light from the trees, slowly pulling the colors from the world around them and bringing the details of the forest to life in the way that Serafina was used to. "Now, tell us what you found out, Serafina," Braden said. "What's going on with these animals?" "First, tell me about Gideon," Serafina said. "How is it possible that he's walking?" Chapter 29. "Gideon is still weak, but he's healing very quickly," Braden answered Serafina's question. "I've never seen anything like it," Rowena said. "That's such good news," Serafina said, relieved, but she sensed Braden's confusion. "When I saw Gideon laying there on the floor in all that blood," Braden said, "I swear he was dead, or just about to die. His body was broken, his eyes were closed. I got down on my knees and I leaned forward to say my last words to him. When I put my hands on him, his body was so still, so lifeless. I thought I was too late. He would never hear my words to him. He was already gone. But then I felt his heart start beating, and a few seconds later he opened his eyes and looked at me with such emotion in his eyes." Serafina swallowed hard. "How is that possible?" "I don't know," Braden admitted. Feeling a shiver run down her spine, Serafina glanced up into the trees just in time to see the owl open its wings and disappear into the darkness. "Do you remember what happened before, Braden, with the black cloak?" she said. "I think it's happening again. Not the cloak itself, but something else like it. I encountered the bearded man again. He's some sort of conjurer. The mountain folk call him the Old Man of the Forest. The Cherokee call him the Darkness. I think that Graythan is his spy here at Biltmore. Or maybe one of his demons or his apprentice. I'm not sure, but they're working together. We need to watch Graythan and figure out how we can defeat him." Braden nodded. "We should find out what room he's staying in, and when we're sure he's not there, we should search it." "Are you talking about Detective Graythan?" Lady Rowena said. "He's staying in the Van Dyke room on the 3rd floor. Serafina and Braden both looked at Lady Rowena, surprised that she knew something about their enemy that they did not. "I overheard him telling the staff that he'd be going out this evening and he wouldn't be back until the morning," Rowena said. Braden smiled, obviously impressed. "I could be so much more useful if I actually understood what we are talking about," Rowena said. If what you say is true, then you've already been useful," Braden said. "But hold on," Serafina said doubtfully. "You said he was going out tonight?" "Yes," Lady Rowena said confidently. "But why?" Serafina asked. "What reason did he give for going out at night? The house is surrounded by nothing but gardens and forest for miles." "He told the staff that he would be taking his carriage into town," she said, "but of course I know he was lying." "You did?" Serafina asked in surprise. "How?" "He had the wrong kind of shoes. He had his old, cracked, muddy boots on. Positively dreadful. No one in their right mind would wear such hideous things into town." Serafina smiled. She was liking Rowena more and more. "Tell us what else you noticed." "Well, he's an extremely poorly dressed person, that I can tell you without hesitation. His coat is badly worn and altogether of the wrong season. Someone needs to tell that man that it's 1899. Serafina nodded. The fashion critique was expected, but then Lady Rowena continued. Yesterday, the nasty man followed me through the rose garden. He probably thought I didn't know he was there, but a lady knows when a man is following her, whether he's a proper gentleman or a commoner like Mr. Grayson. He's been watching Braden very carefully as well, and he's been looking for you, Serafina. Did you know that? He asked me at dinner 2 nights ago if I knew if you had truly left Biltmore. He stays well clear of Mr. Vanderbilt and Mrs. King, but he's been cornering the servants and asking questions about somebody called Mr. Thorne, and something about a sculpture of a stone angel in the forest. I don't know what it all means, but at dinner every night he pulls guests aside and practically interrogates them. Serafina stared at Lady Rowena in stunned disbelief. The girl was a walking encyclopedia of house gossip and intrigue. Well, Lady Rowena said in response to Serafina's look of surprise, I've been rather bored here all alone. I had to take up some sort of hobby, didn't I? What about Mr. Olmsted? Serafina prompted her. What does he have to do with any of this? Braden asked. What have you seen, Rowena? Serafina persisted. He lurks in his gardens late in the afternoon. After dinner he spends endless hours in the library looking over old sketches and photographs as if he's pining for the bygone days. But every morning at breakfast Mr. Vanderbilt asks where he's going for a walk that day, and he says he's just wandering, going wherever the wind takes him, but he's lying just like Mr. Grayson. Lying? Braden asked. Mr. Olmsted is lying to Mr. Vanderbilt? Serafina asked. Oh, yes, definitely. He says he's going for a leisurely stroll, but he goes straight out like a shot in the same direction every day, like he's on some sort of mission out there in the woods. She seems to be a fount of observations, Braden said, amused by this sudden turn. Serafina took in everything Rowena had said, then focused on the next step. Braden, do you remember the 4 stallions I told you about? Braden nodded. I went to the stables and checked into it, but the stallions were gone. The stableman told me that they were only here for a short time, and they hadn't seen them since. Serafina frowned. Can you find out exactly who they belong to? Normally, I would ask Mr. Rinaldi, may he rest in peace, but I could go back and see if he registered the horses' owners in his logbook. Good. Please do that, Serafina said. It might provide us more clues about how all this fits together. And what about me? Lady Rowena asked. If Braden has a job, then so should I. Serafina studied her. It was hard to believe that this was the same Rowena as before, but she truly did seem like she wanted to help and be part of their group. If there's spying to be done, then I'm your girl, Rowena said. What do you want me to find out? Serafina wasn't sure how far she would trust Rowena, but she'd give her an assignment as a test. I want you to get a list of all the guests staying at Biltmore and what rooms they're in. Every bedroom has a name, so learn them, just like you did with Mr. Grayson's room. And if anyone new arrives, we definitely need to know that. We also need to know everything that's talked about at dinner, especially involving Mr. Grayson. Absolutely, Rowena said. I'm chuffed about this. This is so much more interesting than sitting around with the old lady sipping tea. Are we going to have a secret handshake? A what? Serafina asked in confusion. You know, like real spies. I don't understand, Serafina said. What about secret code names? Amused, Braden looked at Serafina and smiled. Yes, what about secret code names, Serafina? Look, Serafina said, if anyone sees anything unusual, like the arrival of a new stranger or an unexplained shadow in the garden, anything like that, then you need to find me and tell me right away. Got it, Braden agreed. You can count on me, Rowena said. And Lady Rowena, Serafina said, this is important. You can't tell anyone else about what we're doing. No one. Do you understand? Yes. Do you swear? I swear, Rowena said. For any of us at any time, if something happens and it's an emergency, then stop the master clock and the other 2 will see it. Braden nodded, liking this plan. For heaven's sake, how are we supposed to do that? Rowena asked in bewilderment. There's a large clock in the carriage house courtyard, Braden explained. It runs on gears. It controls 14 other clocks throughout the house so that every room is on standard time, just like in my great-grandpa's train stations. What a marvelous way to make sure the servants don't have any excuses for being late, Lady Rowena exclaimed. Serafina shook her head. So how do I get this signal? Rowena asked. On the 3rd floor of the carriage house, there's a small room with the clock's gear mechanism inside, Braden explained. Simply pull the lever to stop the clock, but don't break anything or there'll be hell to pay from Serafina's paw. Not to mention your uncle, Serafina added. If anyone sets the signal, then we'll all meet out on the roof right away, but only use the signal in case of extreme emergency. On the roof, Lady Rowena exclaimed. How do I get on the roof? Take the stairs up the 4th floor, cross through the hall, go down the corridor on the left, and climb out the 2nd window, Braden said, as if this was the simplest thing in the world. Remember, don't stop the clock unless it's an extreme Serafina began, but before she could finish her sentence, she heard someone coming up the darkened path. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Get down, she said, pulling Lady Rowena and Braden into the bushes. What are you doing? Lady Rowena complained. My dress might get snagged on a thistle. Shh, Serafina said as she dragged the girl to the ground and covered her mouth with her hand. Serafina spotted the flicker of approaching torchlight on the leaves of the surrounding trees. She heard the sound of coming footsteps, heavy boots treading across the path. A dark figure came toward them up the path. Her chest tightened when she saw the man's long, weathered coat. Then she saw his spiraling cane and his dark hair. Her heart pounded. It was him. It was the rat fiend Grayson. Rowena had been right. He wasn't going into town for the evening. He was coming right toward them. As he rode rapidly up the path, a murderous determination clenched Grayson's scarred face. It was as if he'd uncovered some new piece of information. He was no longer going to investigate, interrogate, or spy. He was going to kill. He gripped his cane in his hand as if he could transform it into a savage weapon at any moment. Serafina glanced at Braden as he hunched low to the ground, his eyes fixed on their enemy. Lady Rowena began to squirm and panic, her chest rising and falling in her corset, but Serafina held her tight. She tried to keep them all quiet, but her chest was pulling in air too now, fast and hard, preparing her body for battle. Her muscles buzzed, ready to explode. Grayson was 30 feet away, moving quickly. She could hear the shift of his clothes along with the pounding of his feet. 20 feet away now. If it came to it, she thought she could run fast enough to escape him, but Rowena couldn't in her long dress. 10 feet away now. Serafina decided that if Grayson spotted any one of them, she must immediately attack. He was right on top of them now. She crouched down, poised for the lunge. For a moment nothing happened. She thought he was going to pass them right by, without ever seeing them hiding in the bushes just a few feet off the path. But then a beast howled in the distance. Braden and Lady Rowena both startled, their eyes flaring wide. Serafina grabbed their arms and held them in place. No, don't move. Hearing the howl, Grayson stopped abruptly on the path. All Serafina could hear now was the sound of his breathing and the flame of his torch. Peering up through the ferns at him, she slowed her breaths until she was perfectly quiet, not moving in any way. But around her, her companions shifted nervously. Even their rustling clothes made too much noise. Grayson gazed up the path in the direction of the howl. The scars on his face looked like the claw marks of a wild animal. When she saw the glisten of the torch flame reflected in his eyes, she felt a twist of fear coiling through her body.